It started as an ordinary Tuesday evening. The hum of our quiet suburban home filled the background as I rummaged through our closet for my running shoes. As my hand brushed past the usual assortment of coats and scarves, it stopped on something unfamiliar. The cool, smooth surface of a glass caught my attention. Frowning, I pulled it out, a champagne flute, and not just one, but two, nestled next to an unopened bottle of fine champagne, the kind reserved for anniversaries or momentous celebrations. Yet, no special occasion was on the horizon. A chill pricked the back of my neck. My wife, Mia, and I had been married for 8 years. Lately, though, the warmth that once defined our relationship had cooled to a polite indifference. Busy schedules, evening meetings, and whispers of exhaustion had become our new normal. Yet, it was the laughter during her late-night calls and the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke about their fun evenings with Tom and his family that unsettled me the most. Tom was charming, confident, the kind of man who could command a room with a single smile. He and Mia had grown closer over the past months, their connection thriving under the guise of friendly family visits. The small, unsettling feeling in my gut now roared with urgency as I stared at the evidence in my hands. Mia never mentioned any plans involving champagne. I pushed the glasses back into their hiding spot, heart thudding as I tried to rationalize. Maybe I was overreacting. After all, trust was the cornerstone of our relationship, or at least, it had been. The days that followed were a test of my nerves. I couldn't shake the memory of that champagne, its implications casting shadows on everything Mia did. Her smile when her phone buzzed, the way she left the room to answer calls, even her laughter, once a sound I cherished, now stung like betrayal. Friday night brought a dinner at Tom's place, a gathering of friends, neighbors, and casual conversation. My eyes drifted to Mia as she shared an animated story with Tom. They stood too close, their comfort too familiar. I forced a smile, joining the conversation with an edge to my voice that I hoped would pass as fatigue. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, sleep distant. Mia's breathing was steady, content. My thoughts swirled snapshots of our shared life, our children, moments of laughter and fights, all tainted by the gnawing suspicion. I knew I needed to stop speculating and start finding answers. The next day, under the pretense of borrowing her phone to check a restaurant reservation, I unlocked it. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through her messages. At first, it was nothing mundane chats with friends, work updates, but when I reached Tom's name, the last few messages made my heart drop. Inside jokes, plans to meet up without spouses, and a smiley face that now seemed mocking. I locked the phone, placed it back where it was, and sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling. The truth was unraveling before me, thread by thread. But confrontation without full certainty would do more harm than good. No, I needed to be sure. Plans formed in my mind as I stared out at the street, lost in the possibilities. If Mia's laughter had changed, it was because someone else was inspiring it. And now, I was determined to unearth everything, even if it shattered the foundation of our lives. The days following my initial discovery were spent in a haze, a blend of routine and hyper-awareness. Each of Mia's actions was amplified under the lens of my newfound suspicion. A late meeting, her soft laugh as she read a message on her phone, even the way she hesitated before answering a simple question, all seemed loaded with unspoken truths. I started to notice things I'd overlooked before. Her phone, once carelessly left on countertops and coffee tables, was now always within reach. When it buzzed, she would glance at it with a secretive smile, one that wasn't for me. Conversations at the dinner table felt stilted, as though she was distracted or mentally elsewhere. My mind latched onto every detail, weaving them into a pattern I dreaded to confirm. One evening, I decided to push the boundaries of my patience. Mia mentioned she had a book club meeting that night. Normally, I wouldn't think twice. She'd been going for years, returning with stories about the latest literary debates and wine spills. But that night, my skepticism flared. After she left, I waited half an hour, my fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the kitchen table, before grabbing my keys and heading out. The drive to the community center where the book club usually met took less than 10 minutes. I parked a distance away, partially hidden by shadows, and scanned the building's softly lit windows. My eyes picked out familiar faces in animated discussion, but Mia's wasn't among them. The air felt heavy in my lungs as I waited, watching the comings and goings until I could no longer convince myself that she would walk through those doors. I drove home, my chest tight with betrayal and adrenaline. As I turned onto our street, headlights caught the silhouette of a car pulling into Tom's driveway. I slowed, enough to see Mia step out and exchange a quick word with Tom before heading inside. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel, a chill spreading from my core. There it was, confirmation without words. Back home, the house felt colder, emptier. I sat on the edge of our bed, listening to the silence. When Mia returned, an hour or so later, she moved through the house quietly, slipping into bed without waking me. Her presence beside me was suffocating, yet I forced myself to breathe evenly, feigning sleep. The familiar scent of her perfume lingered as if mocking me. The next day at work was a blur. Colleagues' voices faded to background noise as my mind replayed the scene at Tom's house. I scrolled through online forums and articles, seeking methods to confirm infidelity. It was then I decided to go beyond passive suspicion. That evening, I purchased small voice recorders and a phone cloning app. Installing the recorders was easier than expected. I tucked one into her car and another into her work bag, hoping for subtle revelations. The app, however, was trickier. It required access to her phone for a few minutes. That opportunity came a few days later when she showered. My hands shook as I connected her phone to my laptop, transferring data that felt like a betrayal of my own principles, yet necessary. Hours later, I reviewed the recordings and clone messages. Most were benign, mundane exchanges that stirred guilt for doubting her. But then, snippets of conversation with Tom surfaced. Their playful banter, shared plans for lunch meetings, and more. Each word was a stone in the pit of my stomach. There was no explicit mention of what I feared most, but the tone was unmistakable. One recording caught my attention, a conversation about a weekend event at Tom's lake house. I hadn't been invited, hadn't even known about it. Mia's voice, light and teasing, intertwined with his. It was enough to paint a picture I wished I could erase. I shut my laptop, staring at the dark reflection of my face on the screen. The signs were no longer subtle, and the last remnants of denial crumbled. The trust that had once been our foundation now lay in shards, impossible to piece back together. Yet, confronting her head-on wouldn't be wise. Not yet. There was still more to learn, and if Mia was capable of deception, I needed to be equally patient. The true shape of the betrayal was still unfolding, and I intended to catch every last detail before I made my move. The days blurred into a relentless cycle of suspicion and silent observation. Every moment Mia spent on her phone, every slight shift in her behavior chipped away at my composure. But it was the recordings that truly broke the illusion. Late at night, when the house was steeped in silence, I'd play back snippets of her conversations, listening to the lilt of her voice that once filled me with warmth. Now, it only brought a hollow ache. One evening, I sat in my office, fingers tapping nervously on my desk, as a new batch of recordings downloaded from the car recorder. The timestamp marked it from the prior afternoon, a drive I knew she took from work to what she called an errand. My stomach clenched as I pressed play. "Thanks for yesterday. It was, well, you know," Mia's voice said, a touch of shyness mingled with excitement. The pause that followed, filled only with the soft hum of the engine, spoke volumes. A deeper voice responded, unmistakable in its familiarity, Tom's. "I'll always make time for you, Mia." A silence fell, charged and suffocating. My hands shook, the headphones trembling in my grasp as I yanked them off. There was no turning back now, no room left for doubt. Whatever defense I could have imagined for her work stress, innocent fun crumbled into dust. The voice recorder confirmed it. Their connection wasn't confined to stolen glances or platonic conversations. It was deeper, intimate, and carved from the very foundation of trust we'd built. Despite the searing anger, a cold determination settled over me. Confronting her without a plan would only allow her to twist the truth, to cast shadows on what was now so starkly clear. I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed undeniable proof. I spent the next week preparing. Early one morning, when Mia left for work, I took the opportunity to explore her laptop. It was risky, but necessary. The password was simple: our wedding date. My chest tightened at the irony. Within minutes, I found what I dreaded most. An email thread titled, innocuously enough, Weekend Plans. Their messages were warm, flirtatious, and at times, downright incriminating. Tom spoke of a shared retreat at his lake house, mentioning details that made my blood run cold. I sat back, heart hammering in my chest. The final confirmation came in the form of a folder labeled Photos. My trembling hand clicked it open, revealing images of them. Candid smiles, casual embraces, moments that once belonged to me. My world, which had once seemed so secure, spun out of control. Returning the laptop to its place, I stumbled into the kitchen, gulping a glass of water as if it could wash away the bile rising in my throat. The betrayal was now undeniable. And yet, with each piece of evidence I found, my anger transformed. It became a methodical, calculated resolve. Mia would not see this coming. She had no idea of the storm I was about to unleash. The house was quiet that evening when Mia returned. She greeted me with a smile that now felt false, hollow. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, setting her purse down and slipping out of her heels. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice steady, masking the rage and the anguish with practiced ease. "Just thinking about a trip I'd like us to take soon." Her eyes lit up, but it wasn't the reaction of a devoted wife. It was relief, an assumption that I was oblivious, still safe in the role of the trusting husband. She didn't know I had uncovered everything, seen the depth of her lies. I watched her move around the kitchen, her laughter cutting through me like shards of glass. Every touch, every word between us was now painted with the bitterness of what I knew. Over the next few days, I pieced together my response, reaching out to someone who would be key to this plan. Kate, Mia's best friend. Kate had always shown a level of attention that bordered on flirtatious, but I'd never entertained it. Now, I saw it as an opportunity, one that could flip the script on Mia's betrayal. We met for coffee under the guise of casual catch-up. But when I laid out what I knew, Kate's surprise turned to understanding, then something more, a glint of mischief mixed with solidarity. She agreed to help, not just out of loyalty to me, but perhaps because she had her own reasons for wanting to upset the balance. The stage was set. I would gather every last piece of evidence and hold on to it until the perfect moment. Mia's birthday was just weeks away, a day she'd expect to celebrate with friends, family, and laughter. Instead, it would be the day the truth shattered the facade she had so carefully built. The days leading up to Mia's birthday were a blur of planning and deception. The hardest part wasn't pretending that everything was normal, it was the moments when doubt crept in, whispering that I should confront her directly, abandon the charade. But that would hand her the power, allow her to manipulate the narrative. I needed control, and to maintain it, I had to bide my time. Kate and I met again, this time away from prying eyes, in a small cafe nestled at the edge of town. The clink of cups and the low hum of conversation masked the tension between us. She leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp with determination. "Are you sure about this, Alex?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, the conviction in my chest firm. It's not just for revenge. It's to show her that she can't play with people's lives and walk away unscathed. Kate's lips curled into a smile that held no humor. "Good. I'm in." Kate had been Mia's confidant for years, the one who knew every secret Mia chose to share and those she didn't. But there was always something simmering beneath their friendship, an unspoken rivalry. Whether it was Kate's hidden feelings for me or her frustration with Mia's self-absorbed nature, it didn't matter now. We had a shared goal. Our meetings became more frequent, carefully timed and discreet. We chose places Mia would never go. A quiet bar on the outskirts, a park in the early morning. With each encounter, our connection grew from mere complicity into something more tangible. It was a strange blend of camaraderie and mutual need. We were each other's instruments of defiance, both tethered to the same painful revelation, yet finding power in plotting against it. One evening, I left a recording device active in our living room while I pretended to be out with friends. Listening to it later, I caught Mia's phone call with Tom. Their conversation was banal at first, talking about upcoming weekend plans, then dipped into flirtatious territory that made my jaw clench. "Can't wait to see you," Mia said, her voice playful. "Me too," Tom replied, with that confident tone that now grated against my nerves. I stopped the recording, my pulse pounding. It wasn't enough to catch them in words. I needed something tangible for what I had in mind. That's when I decided to use a hidden camera. I positioned it carefully in our bedroom, concealed among the books on a high shelf. It was an invasion of privacy, but that word had long lost its meaning in my mind. Mia had already trampled on trust. I was merely stepping over what remained. Kate, meanwhile, became the perfect accomplice. Her casual visits to our home increased. Under the guise of checking in on me after a rough period, Mia noticed but never questioned it. She likely assumed it was just a friend being supportive. The irony was almost comical. During one of Kate's visits, while Mia was at work, we sat on the couch, our conversation punctuated by long silences. The tension between us was palpable, uncharted, but undeniable. "Do you think this will really change anything?" Kate finally asked, breaking the silence. "It will for me," I said. "It's the only way I can face what comes next." Kate nodded, her expression softening. She reached out, her fingers grazing mine. The touch lingered, an unspoken understanding passing between us. It was the first time since the whole ordeal began that I felt a flicker of something beyond anger, an unexpected comfort that made me both uneasy and resolute. The plan was set in motion over the next week. I coordinated with friends, arranging a surprise birthday party for Mia. The guest list included everyone from her close friends to colleagues, Tom, of course, and Kate too. Each day leading up to the event, I acted the part of the doting husband, asking Mia for her favorite cake flavor, planning her outfit, ensuring every detail was perfect. Her eyes sparkled as she talked about the upcoming celebration, unaware of the storm building behind my smile. The hidden camera did its job. One afternoon, as I sifted through the footage, I found it. Mia and Tom in our bedroom, their movements too familiar, too intimate. The final confirmation. I stared at the screen, my emotions swirling between rage, sadness, and a hollow sense of victory. This was proof beyond deniability. The power to shatter her illusions rested in my hands. As the day of the party neared, Kate and I rehearsed our roles, careful not to slip up. I felt torn, a deep part of me questioning if I had gone too far, but the thought of Mia's betrayal reminded me why this was necessary. I was no longer just the husband who had been wronged. I was now the architect of the reckoning she would face. Mia's birthday dawned bright and deceptively serene. The morning sun cast warm patterns across our room, a stark contrast to the cold anticipation in my chest. She stirred beside me, her eyes opening to find my practiced smile waiting. "Happy birthday," I said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. She laughed softly, a sound that once melted me, now a hollow echo of what we used to be. "Thanks, Alex. I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of this," she said, beaming. I watched her get up, stretching lazily, oblivious to the layers of deception swirling around us. The day passed with a blur of calls and well wishes. I could see her excitement building. She had no idea what waited for her. The house transformed as the caterers arrived, filling our living room with the scent of gourmet appetizers and champagne flutes that mirrored the ones hidden in the closet weeks before. By late afternoon, guests started filtering in. Friends hugged her warmly, oblivious to the undercurrent. Tom arrived soon after, his confident stride cutting through the room as he clasped my hand in greeting, a broad grin stretched across his face. The touch burned, but I kept my expression neutral, my plan holding me steady. Kate came in last, her eyes locking on mine with a silent nod. She wore a dress that turned heads, fitting for the role she was about to play. I waited, each second stretching like an eternity. When the party was at its peak, laughter and conversation bubbling over, I cleared my throat, raising my glass. The room quieted as all eyes turned to me. Mia's smile was wide, bright, expectant. It was a look I'd never forget. "To Mia," I began, letting the words settle. "To her joy, her kindness, and the way she brightens every room she steps into." The guests raised their glasses, a cheer erupting, but I held up my hand, signaling for more. But tonight, I'd like to share something more personal, something that's been kept hidden for too long. A murmur swept the crowd, shifting the atmosphere from jovial to tense. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, casting it to the connected screen behind me. The photos of Mia and Tom flickered to life. Stolen moments frozen in time, smiles that once betrayed nothing now spoke of secrets laid bare. Gasps punctuated the silence. Tom's face drained of color as his hand fell limply to his side. Mia's eyes widened, confusion dissolving into horror. "Alex, what?" she started, voice trembling. I held up a hand, stopping her words. "Please, let me finish." The room felt smaller, tighter, as I met her gaze. "Mia, I believed in us, trusted every word, every promise. And while you had your secret, I found solace of my own." I turned, nodding at Kate, who stepped forward, the crowd parting around her like a wave. The whispering swelled, eyes darting between the two women. Kate's expression was calm, yet fierce. "You're not the only one who found comfort outside your marriage," I said, my voice steady but filled with an edge of bitterness. The shock on Mia's face shifted, a kaleidoscope of betrayal, hurt, and disbelief. Her eyes glistened, but I felt no pity. "Not now." She opened her mouth, then closed it, the words caught in her throat. Around us, guests exchanged uneasy looks, some shifting uncomfortably, others glancing at their drinks as though seeking escape from the suffocating tension. Tom stammered, taking a step toward Mia. This isn't what it looks like." But his voice was thin, unconvincing. No one believed him, least of all me. The silence that followed was profound, charged with the weight of things unsaid. I scanned the room, finding sympathy in some faces, judgment in others. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Mia knew, that everyone knew. I wasn't the oblivious husband anymore. I had taken control, shifted the narrative. Mia's voice finally emerged, cracked and raw. "Why, Alex? Why do this here now?" I set my glass down, looking at her with a calm I didn't quite feel. "Because lies don't deserve quiet corners, Mia. They deserve light." The room shifted again as Kate reached for my hand, a move that cemented the shock. Eyes turned to her, judgment and curiosity in equal measure. Her touch was both grounding and incendiary, the final piece in this web of revelations. As murmurs started up again, louder this time, Mia sank onto the nearest chair, eyes unfocused. Tom's gaze darted around, searching for an escape that didn't exist. I felt a strange, somber satisfaction, the kind that comes not from victory, but from a painful truth unveiled. The unraveling was complete, and from here, only consequences remained. The room seemed to pulse with the shockwave of my revelation. Conversations splintered into murmurs and whispers, eyes darting between Mia, Tom, and Kate. I could almost hear the unspoken thoughts racing through their minds, the way they tried to piece together the implications of what I had just laid bare. The moment felt suspended in time, frozen at the edge of upheaval. Mia's hands shook as she clutched the armrests of her chair. Her face was pale, her eyes darting between Tom and me, unable to settle. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, stripped of the confident ease that once defined her. The betrayal in her gaze stung, but I steeled myself. This wasn't the time for sympathy. Tom took a hesitant step forward, as if he could somehow salvage the night. "Alex, this is absurd. You've misunderstood everything," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of so many eyes. "Stop, Tom," I said, my tone sharp enough to silence him. "I've seen it all, the messages, the meetings, even the nights at the lake house. Save your excuses." The room fell silent again, the kind of silence that pricks at your ears. I could feel the tension thickening, the curiosity of friends who had come to celebrate now replaced by a voyeuristic dread. Kate's hand tightened on mine, a small gesture that told me she was here, in this chaos, not just as a bystander but as an accomplice. Mia finally found her voice, trembling and thin. "Why didn't you just come to me, Alex? Why this spectacle?" "Because you would have lied, Mia," I said, my anger simmering just below the surface. "Like you did when you told me you had a book club. Or when you said those late nights were work meetings? You don't deserve a private confrontation. The sting in my words cut deeper than I anticipated, and Mia flinched, tears welling in her eyes. Part of me felt a tug of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the months of doubt and the nights I spent unraveling the truth alone. Around us, the guests had divided into silent clusters, some watching with wide-eyed horror, others whispering to each other, glances darting like skittish birds. Someone shifted uncomfortably, their chair scraping against the floor, breaking the tense quiet. It was the sound that triggered Mia's response, a burst of motion as she stood, eyes fixed on me with a mixture of defiance and despair. "You think this was easy for me?" she spat, voice rising. "You shut yourself out, Alex. We were distant for months, and I need it." "Don't," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare make this my fault. I might have pulled away, but I never strayed. You did." Kate stepped forward, her presence commanding. "Mia, you were my friend," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. "You didn't just betray Alex. You betrayed me too." The weight of those words seemed to crush what little composure Mia had left. She looked at Kate as if seeing her for the first time, eyes widening in realization. The silence in the room became stifling, broken only by a few coughs and someone's nervous laughter that quickly died away. Tom, who had been motionless, finally turned to leave, the room's judgment heavy on his shoulders. A few guests followed, uncomfortable with the rawness of the scene unfolding before them. Others stayed, rooted by morbid fascination. "I never wanted it to come to this," Mia whispered, her voice breaking, but the apology was more for herself than anyone else. I met her gaze, searching for any sign of the woman I had once loved. But all I found was a stranger who had rewritten our story without my consent. "It already did, Mia," I said, my voice low. "You just didn't think you'd get caught." With that, I set my glass down on the table and walked away, the room parting before me like a sea of judgmental stares. Kate followed, her steps echoing mine. We didn't look back as we left the house, the cold night air washing over us like a baptism. The murmur of voices behind us faded as the door swung shut. Outside, under the streetlights in different glow, Kate and I stood in silence. The chaos we had left behind felt surreal, like the final act of a play whose script we'd rewritten. She reached for my hand, and I let her, feeling the tremor in my fingers subside. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, the exhaustion of months weighing heavy on my heart. "Now we start over," I said, though what that meant was as unclear as the path ahead. The night was crisp and silent, but unlike before, I no longer felt trapped. The reckoning had come and gone, leaving behind echoes of its fallout. But in its place, there was space raw, painful, but mine to rebuild. The house stood behind us, a fractured monument to the night's upheaval. The silence in the car ride home was thick, an unspoken acknowledgement of everything that had just unfolded. Kate's hand rested on her lap, fingers tapping in nervous rhythm. I glanced at her profile, strong, resolute, yet tinged with uncertainty. What had begun as a calculated partnership now felt like the prelude to something neither of us could name. When we reached my apartment, the one I had moved into after discovering Mia's betrayal, the air felt heavy with anticipation. I unlocked the door, and we stepped inside, the quiet settling over us like a blanket. Kate let out a long breath, breaking the stillness. "I didn't expect it to feel so empty," she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. "Neither did I admitted. The chaos of the party replayed in my mind, Mia's stunned silence, the disbelief in the eyes of friends and strangers alike. It felt like a scene pulled from someone else's life, yet it was my reality now. I crossed the room, tossing my keys onto the counter, the clink sounding hollow in the small space. Kate leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Do you think she'll try to reach out?" she asked, searching my face for an answer I wasn't sure I had. "She might," I said, my voice hardening. "But there's nothing left to say. Tonight, everyone saw the truth." The words echoed in my mind, solidifying the finality of it all. The realization brought an unexpected calm, a strange peace that had been absent for months. The days that followed were a whirlwind of questions and awkward encounters. Friends reached out, some with hesitant sympathy, others with morbid curiosity. The news of the party had spread like wildfire, whispered through mutual circles until even those I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages, all variations of, "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" The attention was suffocating, yet necessary. It meant that Mia couldn't hide behind lies anymore. Mia called twice, each time her number lighting up my phone like a taunt. I let it ring out, listening to the voicemail notifications with a mix of anger and fatigue. The first message was short, her voice strained and broken. "Alex, please. We need to talk. I need you to understand." I deleted it without hesitation. The second was longer, filled with apologies that only served to remind me how late they were. By the end, her voice cracked, and there was silence before she hung up. It felt like closure in an unexpected way. Kate and I maintained our cautious dance, tethered by shared experiences yet uncertain of what came next. One evening, a week after the party, she showed up at my door with takeout and a hesitant smile. We ate in the living room, surrounded by the quiet that had become familiar. "So, what now?" she asked, breaking the silence. Her eyes met mine, a blend of hope and vulnerability. "I'm not sure," I said honestly, "but I know I don't want to keep living in the shadow of what happened. This isn't just about revenge anymore, Kate. It's about moving forward." She nodded, a small smile forming. "Then maybe we figure it out together," she said, shifting closer. Her hand found mine, and for the first time, the contact felt warm, not just a pact sealed in anger, but a genuine connection. As days turned to weeks, the chaos began to settle. I finalized the separation, ensuring Mia had no room to twist the story back in her favor. Tom disappeared from social gatherings, his reputation marred by the revelations at the party. I didn't care what became of him. His absence was a reminder that I had emerged from this tangled mess stronger, wiser. Kate became a constant, not just a co-conspirator, but a companion who understood the scars left behind. Our relationship was tentative, uncharted, but it held promise. We spent quiet evenings talking about everything and nothing, sharing parts of ourselves that had been neglected for years. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast the room in a warm glow, I found myself laughing at a story Kate told about her childhood. The sound startled me, raw and unpracticed, but it was real. She smiled at me, eyes softening. "There it is," she said, "the Alex who isn't weighed down by everything." I felt the truth of her words sink in. The pain of Mia's betrayal still lingered, a bruise that would fade slowly, but it no longer defined me. I had survived it, clawed my way through the wreckage to find something worth holding on to. And as the evening settled around us, the shadows that had loomed so large in my life began to recede. I wasn't just the man who had been wronged. I was the man who chose to rebuild. It was a small victory, but in that moment, it felt like everything.